we need such a configuration of negotiated solutions that will address the root causes of the conflict and will ensure lasting peace in terms of constructing Eurasian and global system of indivisible security. We do not see any major obstacles to continue the process that was initiated by the Russian and US presidents to identify the frameworks for the Ukrainian peace process and to achieve these results. We understand that it's a hard and laborious work, and this work shouldn't be carried out at the microphone or through the leaks and information. It should be done by diplomats, by taking diplomatic efforts, by using diplomatic toolkit. I think everything is clear in this regard. Since we also had a lot of questions, we noted that the U.S. Department of the Treasury has introduced unilateral sanctions on the Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil, and I quote, due to the fact that there is a lack of commitment of the Russian side to the peace process in Ukraine. We view this step as counterproductive from the point of view of messages that are in favor of addressing the conflict. If the current U.S. administration will follow the example of their predecessors who tried to coerce Russia into renouncing their national interests by imposing unilateral sanctions, the result wouldn't change. They will fail, and they will strongly affect the stability of the global economy. But we won't face any problems taking into account the decisions that were taken by the Department of Treasury. Our country has adopted and developed solutions and continues to develop its energy potential. Again, talking about sanctions, we have just received news about a new package of sanctions imposed by the European Union. Yes, we received the news, but this decision wasn't yet published, and it wasn't presented as a document. We have just acquired this information 15 or 20 minutes ago. We will provide a detailed commentary, and we will explain what would be the consequences of these decisions, and we will do that once we understand what kind of restrictions are envisaged by a new package of sanctions. We don't, again, have details of their sanctions, but again, we would like to repeat that unilateral restrictions of the European Union are ineffective. EU elites cannot admit the obvious. Sanctions that they impose on Russia, as they conceived them, these sanctions do not work. Sanctions that they impose on Russia strike the European Union itself. Well, they have exhausted all their measures. They have tested all their methods and means that they have to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia and to strike the Russian economy and defense. Russia has a right to respond to the hostile activities of the EU, even if we are talking about the failed attempts to cause our country damage. We believe that it is more correct and more beneficial for us. We will respond properly and by taking into account our own national interests. Well, now, situation in Ukraine. The Kiev regime continues to attack civil facilities by terrorizing the Russian civilians. From July to September, 1,740 9 Russian citizens suffered from the actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, with 1,532 persons wounded, including 88 children. 217 people are killed, including children. The office of president likes so much to talk about children. I'm not asking if they have any shame. I will respond, they have no shame at all, but they should have some logic in their statements. If they hold children dear to them, probably the office of the president should stop killing these children. Again, 217 people are killed, including 6 children. From February 2022, 24,300 people, civilians, peaceful civilians, suffered at the hands of Ukraine Nazis in total. Just look. Zelensky and his gang like to talk about the Ukrainian identity and pride, but couldn't.
Handcrafted jewelry inspired by a magical realm. Briganka by Tanish.
Statistic information. There are lives of peoples. Out of 24,300 people, at least 17,205 persons were wounded, including, and now pay attention please, 1,041 children under the age of 18. 7,094 persons were killed, including 234 children. In the past week, 105 Russian citizens have been affected by Ukrainian artillery strikes and drone attacks, of whom 20 have been killed, including 1 child, and 85 wounded, including 7 children. Now I will provide more details. October 15th, as a result of the drone attack in Kozinka village, Grivoron district, Mr. and Mrs. Taranik, head of the Gora-Podolskaya territorial administration, deputy head of the Kozinska territorial administration, were injured. On October 15-16th, village Berezovska, Krasny Oktyabr, and Ustinka, 1 person died and 2 were injured as a result of the drone attack on a car. October 16th, Ukrainian drones deliberately attacked residential areas in villages Gora-Podol, Dobraya Dorogosha, Oktyabrskaya village, a regular bus in a Lokashara village, and an enterprise in Shebakina city. 1 person died. He brought humanitarian assistance for local population. 8 people were injured. October 17th, as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack on company vehicle on the motorway between Kazinka-Mikhailovka, a head of the Kazinska territorial administration of the Valu district, Viktor Gazhenko, was wounded. At the same day, a married couple was UAV in Grivoron city. October 18th, as a result of the FPV drone attack on the car at the outskirts of the Hutor Kurgashki, a 13-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl were wounded. They're just teens. It happened in villages Kazinka and Glotovo, Grivoron districts, as a result of the explosive devices that were dropped by the UAVs. 2 men were injured. At the motorway Mokra-Orlovka-Dunayka, as a result of the drone attack on the civilian car, ahead of the Mokra Orlovka village, Kulakov was injured. October 19th, Shebakina city near Kazinka village of Valo district and in the motorway Grushenka-Borisovka, drone attacks have affected 3 persons. On October 20th, as a result of the explosive devices dropped by the UAVs on the agricultural enterprise in Yasny Zori, 2 died and 1 suffered. Bryansk region, October 15th, 17th, as a result of FPV drone attacks on 2 civilian cars in Startova village and Shilinka village, and on residential area of Brachlov village, 1 person died and 2 were injured. On the night of October 21st, as a result of the drone attack on Klintsy city, a teen born in 2010 was injured. Voronezh region, October 19th, as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack on the civilian car in the Kantemirov district, a woman was injured. DPR, October 15th, the artillery shelling and drone attacks in Gorlovka city killed a woman born in 1965, a woman and a man born in 1941 and 1976 respectively were injured. October 19th, in Dokochaevsk city, Ukrainian UAV wounded a woman. Zaporozhye region, October 15th, as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack in Kamenko-Dniprovskaya, a 15-year-old teen and 20-year-old man were injured. October 16th, as a result of the drone attack, Ivan Zuev, a war correspondent of RIA Novist, was killed. He wrote about the bloody crimes committed by the Kiev regime since 2014. His colleague Yuri Voitkevich was injured. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has posted on its website a detailed commentary due to the attack by the Kiev regime and our journalists. Kursk region, October 16th, as a result of the attack of the enemy drone on the civilian car, a 42-year-old man was injured. Rostov region, on the night of October 21st, as a result of the massive Ukrainian drone attack on Bataysk city, and after the UAV fell, a block of flats was damaged, as well as a private medical center and shops. 2 civilians were injured, including a minor. Kherson region, October 15th, as a result of the Ukrainian shelling of Chaplinka village, 2 civilians were injured. October 16th, in Novaya Kakhovka city, Ukrainian FPV drone injured a woman. On October 17th, the enemy shelling has killed 3 civilians in Alashki city, including a 10-year-old boy. And the night of October 18th, as a result of the drone attack on Zhelezny Pork village near the temporary accommodation facility for evacuees, a married couple was killed, a 66-year-old man and his 65-year-old wife. October 20th, the Ukrainian shelling and drone attacks in Novaya Kakhovka city has injured 3 persons in Tavriskaya village. We are talking about civilian population, including children and minors. The packages, sanctions packages, will start with the first topic. We truly noted the statements, some statements made by U.S. President. They were made on October 22nd when during his interaction with the Secretary General of NATO. He made even the most controversial statements. He cancelled the summit Russia-US that was proposed by the US side. We understand that the comments will be provided by the press service of the Russian president about it. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation is open to maintaining contacts with the U.S. State Department to follow up on the understandings that were reached at the telephone conversation between the presidents of US and Russia on October 16th. We needed to stick to the parameters on various aspects of the dialogue, and as well as to continue our progress in the dialogue with regard to the Ukrainian peace process. We hope that Washington will continue to share their approaches and motives for the actions that they are taking. We would like to reaffirm that, talking about the diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian conflict, Russia continues to adhere to the goals of the special military operation that were proclaimed in February 2022, neutral, non-bloc, non-nuclear status of Ukraine, denazification and demilitarization and development of secure guarantees for the freedom of the Russian-speaking population, as well as for providing unobstructed operations of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is the starting point in our work with various countries who want to make a positive contribution to the peace process. We need such a configuration of negotiated solutions that will address the root causes of the conflict and will ensure lasting peace in terms of constructing Eurasian and global system of indivisible security. We do not see any major obstacles to continue the process that was initiated by the Russian and US presidents to identify the frameworks for the Ukrainian peace process and to achieve these results. We understand that it's a hard and laborious work, and this work shouldn't be carried out at the microphone or through the leaks and information. It should be done by diplomats, by taking diplomatic efforts, by using diplomatic toolkit. I think everything is clear in this regard. Since we also had a lot of questions, we noted that the U.S. Department of the Treasury has introduced unilateral sanctions on the Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil, and I quote, due to the fact that there is a lack of commitment of the Russian side to the peace process in Ukraine. We view this step as counterproductive from the point of view of messages that are in favor of addressing the conflict. If the current U.S. administration will follow the example of their predecessors who tried to coerce Russia into renouncing their national interests by imposing unilateral sanctions, the result wouldn't change. They will fail, and they will strongly affect the stability of the global economy. But we won't face any problems taking into account the decisions that were taken by the Department of Treasury. Our country has adopted and developed solutions and continues to develop its energy potential. Again, talking about sanctions, we have just received news about a new package of sanctions imposed by the European Union. Yes, we received the news, but this decision wasn't yet published, and it wasn't presented as a document. We have just acquired this information 15 or 20 minutes ago. We will provide a detailed commentary, and we will explain what would be the consequences of these decisions, and we will do that once we understand what kind of restrictions are envisaged by a new package of sanctions. We don't, again, have details of their sanctions, but again, we would like to repeat that unilateral restrictions of the European Union are ineffective. EU elites cannot admit the obvious. Sanctions that they impose on Russia, as they conceived them, these sanctions do not work. Sanctions that they impose on Russia strike the European Union itself. Well, they have exhausted all their measures. They have tested all their methods and means that they have to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia and to strike the Russian economy and defense. Russia has a right to respond to the hostile activities of the EU, even if we are talking about the failed attempts to cause our country damage. We believe that it is more correct and more beneficial for us. We will respond properly and by taking into account our own national interests. Well, now, situation in Ukraine. The Kiev regime continues to attack civil facilities by terrorizing the Russian civilians. From July to September, 1,749 Russian citizens suffered from the actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, with 1,532 persons wounded, including 88 children. 217 people are killed, including children. The office of president likes so much to talk about children. I'm not asking if they have any shame. I will respond, they have no shame at all, but they should have some logic in their statements. If they hold children dear to them, probably the office of the president should stop killing these children.
Are bloodied, as a result of which thousands and thousands of people are killed. What kind of crime is this? Can you imagine the degree of cynicism when they're trying to gain profit from projects, the goal of which was supposed is actually killing people? That says a lot. The shamelessness and excessive appetites of the Kiev junta have long outraged ordinary Europeans, but the European elites pretend that nothing out of the ordinary is happening. And they stubbornly continue to sponsor modern Bandera followers, neo-Nazis, and the result will be unchanged. Zelensky's gang will once again plunder the funds they've received, and significant part of the weapons supplied on the black market will be resold. And finally, I'd like to once again emphasize that no Western arms injections help the Kiev clique, and it is obvious, nor will they help. No matter the forces or the funds that fall in their hands are immediately lost, they suffer defeat after defeat on the front lines, no matter how much the Kiev propagandists try to claim otherwise. And of course, they continue to clear the political field in Ukraine. Although, what is there to clean up? But they've tried to scrap whatever they could. This coming Sunday, October 26th, Ukraine was supposed to organize and hold its next elections. However, as in the case of the presidential and parliamentary elections, there will be no elections. Moreover, on October 8th, Verkhovna Rada adopted a resolution on the continuity of the functioning of representative bodies of local self-government and the impossibility of implementing the will of the population to re-elect them under martial law. And also appealed to the international community to support, they even found a name for it, this democratic norm although of course they should have added in Kiev style. At the same time, the deputies unceremoniously blamed Russia for the impossibility of organizing these elections. Once again, the political cover for this decision was provided in the August statement of the Association of Cities of Ukraine, which formulated the thesis of the need to preserve the current political configuration of power at the local level in the event that elections are not held. Behind all this, there is also a clear desire on the part of Bankova to begin the long-planned cleansing of the political field in its final stage, of course. You probably recall the first steps in these directions that have been taken. The mayor of Odessa, Mr. Truhanov, who had held his post since May 2014, was suddenly dismissed. The formal reason for that was his alleged retention of Russian citizenship. On October 14th this year, by decree of Zelensky, Truhanov was stripped of his Ukrainian citizenship. The powers of the mayor's office were transferred to a specially formed military administration headed by the former chairman of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional State Administration, Brigadier General Sergei Lysak, of the Security Service of Ukraine. I'm surprised they haven't passed over these mandate to Saakashvili. In order to strengthen his own power in this traditionally Russian city, Zelensky even forgot to grant his decisions a minimal appearance of the so-called democracy. And the fact that the replacement of the mayor of Odessa with a hand-picked general increasingly resembles the establishment of a military dictatorship was even noted around the world. It's not just our estimations alone. A wave shook up social media, mass media. According to media reports, the decolonizers, in quotation marks of course, have already approached Lysak with a demand to dismantle the monument erected in Odessa. First and foremost, this has to be done. Everything else can wait. But they have to dismantle the monument to the greatly hated Alexander Pushkin, which they hate, which was erected in Odessa in 1889, in which Mr. Truhanov stubbornly refused to demolish, because it's a sign of any lack of human qualities. But apparently new times are here, and now Pushkin will have to answer for it. I need to recall the stories in Yerlash of 30 years ago, where, according to the main characters of these sketches, Pushkin has to answer for everything because he's to blame for everything. There is no doubt that other political opponents of Zelensky may also be next on the clique's repressive list. The mayors of Kiev, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk. We cannot rule out that the tried and tested scheme of depriving citizens of their citizenship under the pretext of ties with Russia will be continuously used to remove any undesirable officials from office, especially those from anti-corruption structures, which Bankova has so far unsuccessfully attempted to bring under its control. We will see how the situation develops, but the tendency is clear. And now, as for what is happening not to human rights, but on the destruction of human rights, we regularly draw attention to human rights violations in Ukraine. It's just lawlessness around this, primarily affecting the Russian-speaking population. There is no shortage of evidence of blatant discrimination against the Russian language in this country. More and more things come to light. But surprisingly, Russian language only continues to strengthen its ground, and the number of people speaking Russian are immune to these measures. On October 2nd this year, these so-called public activists, together with the police, just think about it, October 2nd, 2025, not 1939. Or 1940, 41, somewhere in Nazi Germany. No, it's Central Europe, Ukraine of 2025, 21st century. And now there are public raids with the police who conducted a raid, where would you suppose they would find themselves? On the largest book market in Kiev. What was the aim of this raid? It's astonishing. Just think about it to understand the true horror of this phrase. Voluntarily confiscating. Just think about it. Voluntarily confiscating Russian language books. Of public activists together with the police on the largest book market with the aim of voluntarily confiscating Russian language books for their further recycling. Sharkov is just nothing compared to this scale of monstrosity. Let's take a look at their public statements. A direct quote. We expected sellers to consciously refuse to sell illegal goods. They're not talking about drugs. Nor are they talking about prohibited arms. They're talking about books. Just books. However, most of them deliberately did not work. These activists are claiming. In order to avoid inspection, while others hid books or refused to hand them over. What are they talking about? What is UNESCO doing? Where all the officials, fed by the international officials, UNESCO, OSCE, all the international institutions, public activists and officials. Where are the Nobel Prize winners for literature? A book market at the center of Europe, and they're confiscating books on the official language, on the official UN language, the language spoken around the world by hundreds of millions of people. A language that is part of the global civilization. What are they doing, all these Nobel Peace Prize winners?
I believe that the Third Reich has never reached such a bottom. On October 6th, the Ukrainian Russophobic writer Vitaly Kapranov has made Russian-speaking settlers who moved to Lviv responsible for a missile attack on the city. They are to blame. I quote, Lvov faces with the invasion of the Russian-speaking population. Lvov becomes a target of Russian missile strikes. These are facts. And what about the connection between these two facts? You should find it on your own. That's what he wrote in one of his social media pages. Later in the TV show Veliki Lvov, Great Lvov, he told about the failed Ukrainization, and he admitted that in the first days of the special military operation, people were afraid to speak Russian, and in fear they switched to Ukrainian, and now they are no longer afraid and return to their habits. So it seems it's a habit to speak the mother tongue. It's like smoking or jogging in the morning. It's a habit that you can adopt, or you can change, or you can give up. It's a habit for him. This writer offers to increase the number of probably teachers or courses, but now he wants to increase the number of strikes. in order to fight the Russian language, because he said we should be attacked so that we could understand that the language is important. No comments. Because, it's either about, doctors or lawyers should say something about it. In this context, on October 11th, the Deputy Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada and the representative of the neo-Nazi party Svoboda, Ruslan Kashulinsky, offered to fire Russian-speaking Ukrainians, strip them of the right to education, and to prosecute them. October 18th, a member of the Ukrainian parliament from the party European Solidarity, Sofia Fedina, was annoyed that 90% of the residents of Kiev who she meets when she walks on the streets speak Russian. The Russian speech, she admitted the so-called elected member of the parliament that the Russian language inflicts her intolerable pain. Well, again, doctors should comment that, should say something about it, because if someone's speech, if someone speaks around you and you're an elected member of the parliament, if people are speaking to each other on the street and you don't like it, you feel pain because of that, well, you need to go to the doctor, or you need to think about people who voted for you. What do they look like? And however, despite all these restrictions, penalties, acts of bullying, acts of harassment, the Russian language has never disappeared in Ukraine. That Sprachenführer, that language ombudsman Yelena Ivanovska, is ringing the alarm. She's feeling the pain too. It turns out that Ukrainian students and teachers often ignore the state order to speak only in Ukrainian. Ivanovskaya says, and I quote, "The law clearly says that all workers of the educational institutions should speak Ukrainian, but 8% of teachers admit that they speak Russian in their private conversation." End of quote. Private conversation. What are they doing there? I'm sorry. And Kiev is the place where the law is violated the most, because only 17% of students speak Ukrainian. I think they're confused. All those in the office of the President of Ukraine cannot understand how stupid their logic is. All these facts and evidence demonstrate by taking these discriminatory Nazi and neo-Nazi laws, the Ukrainization, and with this failed Ukrainization, the Kiev regime turned Ukraine into a prison where people are put, and where they put this all ideological waste. And in this prison, the one group of people watches the other. They instill into a people a paradigm, we versus them. We are the ones who speak in Ukrainian, and they are the ones who speak in Moscow, in Russian. But it's impossible to make someone artificially love a language. Like, it's important to make someone laugh. You can just violate their psychic and give them a Stockholm syndrome and make them perverts. But you cannot make persons laugh. Finally, it should be admitted that the forced Ukrainization, this ideological violence, cancellation of the native language, all these measures failed. People in Ukraine want to speak the Russian language because it's a native language for them. They want to sing, they want to study and to read, to watch movies in Russian. I will repeat, probably some people don't know, 2025 is coming to an end. Soon the whole world will celebrate the year 2026. And the center of Europe, for a huge amount of money, under the applause of the so-called civilized nations, people are destroying each other because someone who is paid enough bans other groups of people to speak their native languages, and they pin people against each other, and they make people to implement these crazy orders. By the way, in October 15th in Lvov and, well, of course, in Ivano-Frankivsk and in other settlements of Ukraine, neo-Nazis have organized, well, guess what? What could they organize? Humanitarian action, probably some social events, census. No, they have organized so-called memorable events, including torchlit marches on the occasion of the anniversary of the elimination of the fascist collaborationist Stepan Bandera. Well, this is their holidays just, and they were attended by the members of the Schismatic Orthodox Church of Ukraine and by priests of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and it's noteworthy that Banderites conducted their actions right in front of manhunters from the military conscription services. You know, it looks to me that I'm watching an apocalyptic movie. These manhunters didn't even try to find draft evaders or deserters among them, because they are not recruiting their own kind, let alone they do not mobilize them. Everything we're going to talk about today and everything that I mentioned already confirm that the objectives of the special military operation hold true, and all these objectives will be fulfilled, as our leadership has stated many times. And now look how human rights, any freedoms and human rights are violated by Ukraine. On October 13th, the law has been submitted to Verkhovna Rada, which excludes Russian and Moldovan from the list of languages that are protected under the European Charter for regional or minority languages. We have stated many times that Kiev and Moldovan regimes are not acting for the sake of their own peoples, but for the sake of their sponsors. It is no surprise that they have decided to copy the decision of the Moldovan authorities, including to translate the constitution and to change the language from Moldovan to Romanian. Now Ukraine is interested about it too. We believe that the renaming of the language from Moldovan of the Romanian was carried out without paying attention to the opinion of the local population. According to the census, only 76.7% of people see themselves as Moldovans, and 48% believe that they speak the Moldovan language. The Romanian was stated by less than a third of all the correspondents. In the explanations of the act, they provided information that today in Ukraine, the Ukrainian language is the most widespread language of ethnic minorities, and according to many indicators, it is used to the same extent as the Ukrainian language. It's not about the fact that people should be re-educated. It's about the fact that you need to write laws once in a normal way and stop distorting them, because these laws were written, and we need to write down once and again that Ukraine is the language of communication. Well, it should be just admitted, but no, they won't do that. Lawmakers paradoxically admitted what the Kiev regime has been denying all this time, and what has been stating by our country, that they are encroaching on linguistic rights. And now the developments of this law they are saying that this Ukrainian language is not is a mother tongue for a larger part of populations. The Russian language is a language of their speech, of their thought. At the same time, Zelensky's gang has shown that their policy has failed to cancel the Russian language, because they taking all these penalties, restrictions, and cultivating hatred to the Russian language. Despite this depushkinization, they even coined this term, despite the outright harassment of the Russian-speaking people, despite the persecutions of people, they continue to speak Russian. What should they do then? Well, they cannot admit the reality, because the common sense should be defeated in Ukraine. Even more restrictions should be introduced. That's what the Nazi ideology is about. We are talking about encroachment and discrimination of people against language, race. It leads to the total rejection of feelings and intelligence, because only one thing can replace feelings and intelligence: hatred towards other peoples, other nationalities, other religions, cultures, creed, ethnic groups, etc. As it's known, when the Ukraine has submitted an instrument of ratification of the European Charter of Regional and Minority Languages, Ukraine has made it a statement on September 19, 2005, that it will apply on its territory this treaty in line with regard to the Russian language, in line with other languages of the national minorities: Belarus, Bulgarian, Hungarian, Gogaz, Greek, Jewish or Yiddish, Crimean Tatar, Moldovan, German, Polish, Romanian, Slovak, and also guaranteed that measures aimed at the development of the Ukrainian language as a state language will not preclude the preservation and development of these languages. They intend to ostentatiously exclude the Russian language from the list. We view it as a discriminatory act and as a flagrant violation of the fundamental right of Russian-speaking residents of Ukraine, as an attempt to forcibly change the linguistic identity of people living in Ukraine. Such actions are not compatible with the spirit, goals, and principles of the European Charter of Regional and Minority Languages, and go against the key international documents in the field of human rights, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the commitments of the OSCE. I will recall you that they flagrantly disregard the constitution of Ukraine, in particular the Article 10, which guarantees the protection and development of the Russian language. The Russian language. It is true that the Moldovan language is not mentioned there, although neo-Banderites who usurped the power have been trampling on the Ukrainian constitution. We unfortunately cannot hope that this discriminatory act of the Kiev junta will receive a proper and principled assessment from the controlling mechanism of the Charter and relevant structures of the Council of Europe, taking into account the current policy of the degraded Strasbourg organization that is aimed at providing comprehensive support to the odious regime of Zelensky. Well, we'll see what they're going to do, because otherwise it means that they are supporting Nazism. In this context, it becomes more and more obvious that there is no alternative to the special military operation and to implementation of its goals, among which densification of Ukraine is one of the crucial aspects, because it is confirmed almost every day. And since we're talking about frozen and stolen assets, I would like to speak on this topic on detail. I can see that the US cannot put up with the efforts of our country, of our partners and other countries of the world to settle the Ukrainian crisis, and they do not even hide their intentions to derail this process in our pursuit of peace and to profit from the Russian sovereign assets. Misappropriation of excess profits wasn't enough for expropriators, and now they are talking about a direct seizure of the significant volume of assets that belong to the Bank of Russia and that are immobilized in accounts in the Belgium depository Euroclear since March 2022. The new initiative of the European Commission is presented as if EU will issue some kind of zero-coupon bonds at the expense of the Russian assets, and reserves will be used in order to extend yet another loan to the Kiev regime for its military ventures and for closing its gaps in the budget, as well as for investments in the war industry of the EU member states. Probably you have visited museums that have in places, they have different waves. These are expositions about genocide, about Nazism, combating Nazism, about combating segregation and apartheid. You probably saw and probably know, or you will see if you go to such places. For example, if you go to the Museum of Holocaust, there are, for example, legal decisions presented there in these museums that today, from the point of view of international law and for normal, ordinary humans, would look sacrilegious, would look awful, because these laws will ban people to live in their own apartments or houses. Rules of behavior in ghettos. These zero-coupon bonds issued by the EU and that will be provided at the expense of stolen Russian assets. Just please keep them if these bonds are issued. I hope that these bonds will be also represented at exhibitions on Russophobia. When Russian citizens, people who speak Russian, who promote the Russian culture, when these people were persecuted and harassed, it will be one of the most important exhibit items. I mean, the European zero-coupon bonds, because it will show how Europe was stealing money from Russians and how it used this money to kill Russians. And in order to do that, they issued a zero-coupon bonds. We believe that Ukraine will pay off loans only after Russia pays its reparations. In this case, the Kiev regime, as European strategists believe, will pay off its debts to the EU, which will, after that, return frozen assets to our country.
And the details of this venture are not yet clear. It's unclear whether this will involve replacing the funds held in the Bank of Russia's accounts with Euroclear with claims of the aforementioned zero-coupon bonds, or whether our reserve will be forcibly pledged as collateral for another loan to the Kiev junta. But it is obvious that the European Union is once again demonstrating a cynical approach to the interpretation of the UN Charter and other norms of international law, including provisions on sovereign immunity, the inviolability of central bank assets, and Russian funds were placed in Euroclear under certain conditions, which were then unilaterally changed by Brussels in order to appropriate our gold and foreign exchange reserves. This is outright fraud and robbery. and these has been
सर जी सपने स्किप नहीं सिप करो सिंपली विजिट kotakmf.com/MrSIP और सीखो SIP के साथ कैसे हो सकते हैं आपके सपने पूरे सिस्टमैटिकली। और
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
who specifically drew attention to the aforementioned thesis. No matter what innovations European bureaucrats come up with, no matter how the new scheme is framed, it will not change the criminal nature of the confiscatory intentions of the European Commission. Any actions involving Russian assets without our consent are null and void under international and contract law. There is no legal way to take someone else's money without it hitting the expropriator's pocket and prestige. It's clear to anyone that the European Union has simply trampled on the notorious rules on which, according to Brussels, the world order should be based. And European jurisdiction and what they try to sell to the international community as future has been trampled on. And the European jurisdiction is no longer a safe haven for financial savings. Trusting Europeans, including Euroclear, with your funds now comes with the risk of losing them completely. We urge you to think twice before taking reckless action. This adventure will only prolong the agony of the Kiev regime, which has lost its legitimacy, will not receive any reparations from Russia, and will not be able to repay its debts. Let's make that clear. Ultimately, Europeans will have to bear full responsibility for the consequences of any possible seizure or other manipulation of our reserves, as well as repay the loans previously issued to Zelensky's gang. Any confiscation initiatives by Brussels will inevitably provoke a painful response. We will act in full accordance with the principle of reciprocity in international relations based on our own interests and the need to compensate Russia for the damage that was caused. And of course, beloved, Canada and Nazism. Truly an astonishing story. I believe that any news coming out of this country is about Nazis. We've paid attention to the recent investigation by the online publication, which based on the Canadian foreign missions. And this was obtained through the Access to Information Act. We found that the Canadian Embassy in Kiev kindly hosted representatives of the Azov National Battalion, treated them to tea, perhaps even with cookies. Yeah, you heard it right, the very same Azov, which according to the Canadians themselves, holds right-wing extremist views and should not be receiving any support. Well, as their beloved movies say never, the ambassador of Canada in Ukraine, Natalka Tsmot, the last letters are Ts and Mekiznak in Russian, who incidentally, like many representatives of the Canadian political panopticon, is the granddaughter of a Nazi collaborator. I believe that's the main criteria that the leaders in Canada are picking their candidates. Was unable to receive the representative of Azov because she was away at the time. But they still held the reception. So the function was carried out by the military attaché, Brigadier General Mener, his deputy major Pauly, and diplomatic mission employee Lane. After the meeting, the Azov member, whose name, of course, was censored by the Canadian Foreign Ministry, thanked them later in correspondence for the friendly and frank exchange of views. In addition, information emerged that Canadian Colt C7 and Colt C8 assault rifles have long been featured in their arsenal as key weapons. The press service of Canada's foreign and defense ministries are staying silent, although subsequent requests were sent out. But everything is clear as it is. It seemed that not so long ago, official Canada tried to clean their name after scandalous story of honoring of a Hitler henchman from the 14th Division of SS, Gunka. I believe everyone remembers that story from the Canadian Parliament. And now they're doing the same. And in November 2024, the Canadian Archives Service imposed a ban on the publication of the list compiled in the 1980s by the Jules Deschenets Commission of Nazi collaborators who moved to the country after World War II. And now, a new emergence. What kind of country is it that loves Nazis and neo-Nazis so much? And all kinds of collaborationists. But there are other forces in the West as well. There is a new book by the Italian scientists, anthropologists, journalists, politologists, The Conflict in Ukraine Through the Eyes of Italian Journalists, 2014 to 2025. It's a rare example of an honest, objective approach to the event taking place in Ukraine. It's quite telling that he tried to paint the Ukrainian crisis, which, despite what the West believes began in 2022, it began 8 years earlier. And this conflict has been brewing for a long time before that. And the West and Italy tries to change the facts of story. But the obvious facts of the crimes of the Kiev regime are being silenced. It's supposed white noise. It's especially important that Eliseo Bertolazzi is a witness of all the aforementioned events. He saw everything with his own eyes. In the period that he describes in these more than 10 years from 2014, he visited Donbass dozens of times. He has visited hotspots. He was shelled. He stayed in reserves, and he met with civilians, with militants, with volunteers. He spoke with the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Zakharova, the head of Donetsk People's Republic, Bashilin. The tragedy took place in front of him. He pictured the chronicles of the Ukrainian coup d'etat in Maidan. He reported on the Donetsk airport that was in flames, on the liberated Mariupol. He's one of the authors of the documentary People Without Peace in 2022 on the crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces against the civilians. And he was deemed by the Kyiv clique as the threat to Ukrainian statehood, and was included in the base of the Ukrainian side, the peace troops. He shares his recordings of the events on the destruction of its own people, and he tries to shed light on the situation. And many sources refuse to publish his materials, and the Italian media space only provides the Western version of events. His book, which includes a lot of articles and reports, is an effort to shed light on the true tragedy in Donbass, in Crimea and Ukraine, to analyze the events and development of Ukrainian crisis. He recalls entering the villages destroyed by the Ukrainian bombs. He recalls surviving residents who begged him to gather evidence and to streamline the truth, understanding that the tolerant Europe, which poses itself as tolerant, chooses to close its eyes, and also of the majority in Ukraine. And if you read this book, and I do hope that you do it, that he feels this tragedy deeply. He feels it is his moral debt to make these voices heard. He also warns of the danger of falsifying history of the Second World War. He tries to combat Russophobia. He takes a close look at the Ukrainization of the Western policy and the Europe as a whole. The presentation of the book will take place on the 24th of October 2025 in the International Multimedia Press Center, Russia Today. Please come and take a look. I believe it could be of interest. Take a look at what else NATO is doing. These are quite close topics. The tryings of the NATO forces. Direct quote. To conduct joint nuclear missions. I would like to confirm that our assessment remains the same. Just the presence of the practice of joint nuclear missions where the alliance countries try to perfect their skills of collective use of nuclear with deployed in Europe against the Russian territory and its allies is deeply destabilizing. And we'd like to know that these schemes and capabilities of the NATO countries are purpose-oriented and will only aggravate the strategic risk and destabilize the situation. The steadfast noon tries, despite statements that it is a routine exercise, already demonstrated new provocative aspects, which require extra attention on our part. View of American military equipment on the UK territory, as well as their involvement in the trials of the British airbase Lakenhead. They also include the expansion of number of countries that they trust with supplying American nuclear arms. They've already purchased the dual-capable aircraft in order to take part in joint nuclear missions. And we also include the expansion of countries that provide support for nuclear-capable aircrafts. We register the first official involvement in this tryings of the air forces of Finland, Sweden, and Norway. We believe this is a sign of a transition of these countries to new, more advanced forms of involvement in joint nuclear missions, and we can't rule out that those who still preserve at the national level some kind of limitation when it comes to appearance of nuclear arms on their territory could later renounce it. Against this backdrop, we notice the relentless calls of official representatives of Warsaw to USA American nuclear arms, and these actions by the non-nuclear states of NATO demonstrate appalling disregard for the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Arms, as well as the agreements with IAEA. And we believe that nuclear arms should be resorted only for peaceful use.
The packages, sanctions packages, will start with the first topic. We truly noted the statements, some statements made by US President. They were made on October 22nd during his interaction with the Secretary General of NATO.
The situation in the southern part of the Caribbean Basin continues to aggravate. And by the strikes of the military forces of the U.S., already 6 ships have been destroyed, including the territorial waters of Colombia, which, according to Washington, without any kind of proofs. They've made these statements without any proof. There were drug traffickers. They announced the approval of the CIA to conduct secret operation on the territory of Venezuela. I'm sorry, but if the U.S. wanted urgently to involve their special services to combat drug trafficking, they should hold a special operation in Manhattan. That's where the situation is truly horrible. Downtown, Midtown. Just talk to people on the streets, and they will tell you exactly who is spreading drugs in New York. The forceful actions of the American military are raising more and more questions. There's information about the Venezuelan, Colombian, and Trinidadian citizens who have been killed. A number of sources claim that they could have been just fishermen. Establishing who exactly was on board would have been possible by inspecting the vessel, if there had been legal grounds to doing so. The deliberate destruction of a vessel, condemning its crew to death, contravenes the international maritime law and basic moral standards. All this is causing growing concern among the states of Latin America and the Caribbean, who declare themselves a zone of peace in 2014. We are, of course, in favor of stable and independent development in the region and the peaceful and civilized resolution of all disputes. We reaffirm our unwavering support for the Venezuelan leadership in defending national sovereignty. We stated this in particular during the meeting of the UN Security Council on October 10th and 17th this year. It is now extremely important to refrain from escalation and to promote the search for solutions to existing problems in a constructive manner with respect for international legal norms. Another topic with Russophobia. On October 16th, a decision has been taken on the discriminatory approach to Russian citizens in Latvia when it comes to discrimination of official Riga towards our citizens. The lawmakers call on the international community to denounce the actions of Latvian lawmakers, to draw attention to violations of rights of Russian-speaking citizens of Latvia. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia always pays particular attention when it comes to providing information that we receive through international diplomacy. These documents are passed over to our embassies, brought to attention of international organizations and parliaments, and this will be handed over to the UN, to Interparliamentary Union, the CIS, the SCO, the African Parliamentary Union, and other relevant organizations. By addressing these appeals to parliamentaries, we operate on the fact that interparliamentary cooperation is a key channel of communication that should remain open. The possibility of dialogue is continuously used to enhance our cooperation, especially when drawing attention to mass discrimination based on language, national, political, or other kinds of beliefs. And once again, the Baltics, in the same key. And here it's the desecration of last month's desecration of the mass graves. And here we're talking about the remains of 215 residents of the island of Saaremaa tortured by the Hitlerites, and the dismantling of the memorial which was eradicated there in 1965.
As Estonia continues to honor the legionnaires of the 20th Waffen-SS Division and continues to wage the campaign to eliminate Soviet war memorials aimed at the revision, I repeat, revisions of the outcomes of the World War II, such acts are completely outrageous. It is a logical effect that the logical effect of glorifying the former Estonian SS members is the rejection of Tallinn to support the annual UN General Assembly resolution that is initiated by Russia combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms. And they should also remember about the fact that such actions are prosecuted by the Russian law. The Court of Helsinki also has adopted a decision about the implementation of the decision of April 12th about the Russian property in Finland, the Finnish court has refused to consider the Russian positions about that, especially about diplomatic immunities. This decision of a Finnish court is a glaring violation of the right to fair travel and impartiality of parties involved. The Russian Federation will appeal this case to the High Court of Finland, Supreme Court of Finland. This topic is still on our agenda. Another topic, in the middle of October, the American corporation Microsoft has published the so-called report about the information security for 2025. They have carried out a review. Unfortunately, we are confused by these documents because they are making politically engaged attacks on Russia, China, DPRK, and Iran. Again, they are not providing any evidence, facts, without providing any authentic information. This is, again, the favorable act of the liberal globalists. They are using the favorable cliches with regard to unwanted countries, because whom they view as an axis of evil, and they are using these traditional cliches against them. They have published a report with one propagandist objective, which is the attempt to rewrite the regulations of the ICTs in their favor, in the favor of their companies and their countries. I would like to recall you that the Western countries refused to have a dialogue in the relevant formats with Russia, where cybersecurity and cyber crimes are discussed in a professional and depoliticized way. In particular, report has no mentioning of this format. I'm talking about the United Nations Global Mechanism on International Information Security that is being established at the moment, and the ad hoc committee on the Convention Against Cybercrime. But in reality, the situation is totally different. It is our country, especially after the launch of the special military operation, is the main target of the transatlantic attacks in information space. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the major hacking attack on Aeroflot Airlines, and such attack is not mentioned in the Microsoft report. And in this attack, there were all signs that the Western cyber potential was used in that attack. October 25th, UNESCO held a vote according to which Russia has become a member of the approval committee of the Fund for the Elimination of Doping in Sport of the Conference of Parties to the International Convention Against Doping in Sport. During a 5-hour secret vote, despite all the bureaucratic shenanigans and attempts by certain states to challenge the right of our country to take part in the vote, our country has won a resounding victory. This decision is understandable and logical, taking into account the reports of our country as part of implementing the convention, as well as the significant annual contribution that Russia makes to the UNESCO Foundation. We will continue an active work as part of the UNESCO in ensuring integrity, justice and equality in sports by expressing our overall commitment to the convention. Another news from global sports, the Court of Arbitration for Sport found discriminatory the decision by the European Table Tennis Union to exclude Russian and Belarusian athletes and officials from the competitions due to the beginning of the special military operation. The court has noted that the European Table Tennis Union has violated the principles of political neutrality and non-discrimination that is enshrined in the Union's constitution and in the Olympic Charter, and we are talking about it for ages. I recall that its fundamental principles forbid any discrimination of athletes, and its policy shouldn't serve as the policy shouldn't serve as a criteria based on which one can make a decision who can do sports and who is not. In most kinds of sports, we continue to witness a flagrant violation of rights and ethnic discriminations on against ethnic discrimination of certain athletes when it comes to the right of equal access to take part in the competition. And another news from Global News again, it is the recent decision of the General Assembly of the International Paralympic Committee about the total reinstitution of the Paralympic Committee of Russia in the global organization. We hope that the court decision will become a starting point and will reinstitute the rights of the Russian sports. We're convinced that sports that is free from politicization will present a fruitful area of international cooperation that will help people to be closer to one another. Another interesting aspects that are related to digitalization, language policy. We've been talking about how Ukraine is undermining its national identity, how they destroy language in which the majority of people speaks. There is another news item which shows how one should respect indigenous languages. Our country takes a lot of efforts to preserve languages of indigenous minority peoples of our country. It is no secret that in the world and in Russia there is a persistent trend towards the disappearance of rare languages, dialects, subdialects, due to the natural processes. These processes are organized in different ways. Scientists are writing about it, and I won't go into details. I would like to tell you how our country supports rare languages. According to UNESCO, 43% languages from out of 7,000 languages, rare languages, are endangered. According to the Linguistics Institution of the Russian Academy of Science, over the past 100 years, 15 minority languages have disappeared in Russia, and 10 out of them have disappeared in the past 35 years. 10% of languages are on the brink of extinctions, and 60% of languages are approaching this risk. There are negative trends like decreased interest among youth to learn the native language due to the lack of prospects to use it in the professional career and unwillingness of their parents to orient children towards studying the native language due to the fact that it's not necessary. Globalization processes has its own effect, and it accelerates stigmatization and extinction of minority languages. In this connection, the UN General Assembly has declared for 2022 and 2032 as the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. It is believed that during this period, the international community will be actively involved in addressing the issue of language extinctions. One of the possible ways to preserve the linguistic and cultural diversity of indigenous peoples is to digitalize it. In the context of its efforts aimed at preserving the languages of the Russian peoples, the Cultural Center, the House of Russian Peoples, collects corpuses of the native languages, parallel texts in various languages that are added to Yandex Translator service. Today, this service includes 14 languages. It has a neural technology for language synthesis and recognition for Bashkir, Mari, and Chuvash languages. It allows to understand how these words sound in various languages and provides an opportunity to have a dialogue with native speakers. The mobile version instantly translates phrases, shows them on the screen, and provides a voice-over in a selected language. Speech recognition and synthesis will allow to will be accessible for more than 10 popular languages, which are spoken by more than 300,000 people. Yandex technologies allow to translate websites in Yandex browser as well as to use voice input in Yandex services. Moreover, this service provides additional opportunity for users to learn more about cultural specifics of the Russian peoples by putting their stories, legends, and articles and materials in a digital format. RealWiki also plays its part. This resource supports 20 languages and 1.5 million articles are written in this source. Each language has its own interface, and authors of materials can be written by employees of RealWiki and by volunteers. In this context, I should highlight the project by the Department of UNESCO of the Northeastern Federal University of Moscow, digitalization of linguistic cultural legacy of indigenous peoples of Arctica, that has a goal to create an international internet portal on languages and culture of indigenous peoples of Arctic. One of the real results of this project is the preservation on digital media, a language and culture of a disappearing people, which is forest Yukaghirs, that there are only several native speakers of this language and culture. These resources are already used in schools at the lessons of the Yukagir language and are accessible online, and there are even native speakers now of this language among the youth. It is obvious that future languages and cultures of the indigenous small-numbered peoples is impossible without the modern processes of digitalization. Digitalization, education, and culture have become one of the three priorities of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. Digitalization of linguistic and cultural legacy, creation of digital libraries, mobile interactive web apps for studying indigenous languages, internet portals, electronic translators and mass media, virtual museums of traditional cultures, development of blogs, audio and visual collection, digitalization of books, of library collections are important tools for preserving distinctiveness and heritage of the indigenous small-numbered peoples of Russia. We have even our project of creating fonts and keyboard layouts based on the extended Cyrillics for more than 150 languages and dialects. You would ask, why is that necessary? We would like to have another Rosetta Stone. For those of you who don't know who is Rosetta Stone, look it up. We are doing that so that we wouldn't have to decipher discoveries that people are going to make in the future, because once language disappears, no one knows how to translate it, how to read it, how to learn, how to discover mysteries that are left in the past. That's why digitalization is the best way to preserve the traditions. October 17th, the former Prime Minister of Japan has passed away when he was the head of the government. From 1994 to 1996, he has put a lot of efforts to develop good neighborly relations and mutually beneficial cooperation with our countries, including establishment of regular exchanges between leaders of our parliaments. We appreciate his pacifist approach, which in particular was outlined in the special statement on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II in 1995. At that time, he apologized for the Japanese aggression in Asia in the second half of the 20th century. If we are talking about genuine pacifism, not a fake pacifism, but genuine pacifism, that this word that includes justice, knowledge, and law, it means that the person admitted the aggression that was experienced by peoples of different countries. The Russian ambassador in Japan, Nikolai Nozdrov, has expressed his condolences due to the passing of Tomiti Murayama, and all the relevant materials were published on the website of our embassy in Japan. And now, important day. October 24th, the international community will celebrate the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Its creation has become one of the main outcomes of the victory in the Second World War. Defeat of Nazism, the fundamental contribution of which was made by our country, has provided prerequisites for establishing a new system of international relations. Having survived unspeakable horrors of war, the international community set a noble goal to never repeat such a devastating tragedy. The UN-centric world order was constructed by the great powers and victors who were able to leave behind their differences for the sake of establishing lasting peace and security for all countries and peoples. However, representatives of the Western camp taken the course to weaken the World Organization, and because of that, she hasn't realized its potential to the fullest. However, the United Nations has made a lot of significant achievements that have provided fundamentals for the modern multipolar world order. The graphic example is the adoption in 1960 at the initiative of the USSR, the declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. Thanks to that process, dozens of independent states appeared on the world map. Recently, the United Nations faced new criticism. Some people claim that it has completed its historical mission and the organization is no longer necessary. It is true that there are a lot of problems in the work of the United Nations, but again, we dare to speak about it, and regularly, not once in a year from the tribunes, just to provide the noise, but we are watching closely these problems, monitoring them. But we are trying to speak about these problems in a diplomatic way and by upholding our national interests. And we give this information to the Secretariat of the United Nations and speak about these problems openly. We are talking about the impartial secretariat, low efficiency, red tape, irrational spending. But the root cause of this problem is not connected with the structural problems. It is related to how delegations view the work of the United Nations and how they use opportunities that it provides. Overall, the United Nations is a mere reflection of the political will and ability of the member states to negotiate. Nonetheless, it cannot question the indisputable fact that the United Nations is the most successful international organization in the history of humanity, and its strength is an unprecedented broad representation and range of powers. The Charter of the United Nations fully it holds true, and it responds to the requests of this document. This stood the test of time, and they should be strictly observed in their totality, entirety, interconnectedness. It is true that the United Nations needs to adapt to the polycentric realities, but at the same time, it's necessary for these changes to be rational and tested, and to be aimed at strengthening institutional foundations of the United Nations, preserving the division of labor between its main bodies, and improving efficiency and operational capacity of the organization. Also, it's important that for these transformations to be carried out under the strict control of its member states, and so that they would increase the role of the countries of the global majority. Russia is a founding member of the organization and a permanent member of its Security Council, understands its responsibility for the fate of the organization. We are ready to work actively together with our many like-minded countries and to work for the sake of the full-fledged re-establishment of the central coordinating role in the United Nations in global affairs as it's envisioned by the foreign policy concept of our country, and to work for the strict compliance with these principles of the United Nations Charter.
And there is another date. This week is actually reached on very important dates. October 24th will mark the 80th anniversary of the UN and of the entry into force of the UN Charter, but it is also 55 years since the adoption of the Declaration on Principles of International Law. 75 years ago, on October 21st, 1950, the Geneva Conventions on the protection of victims of armed conflicts also came into force. Let me remind you that these are 4 treaties concerning the improvement of the fate of wounded and sick military personnel, the treatment of prisoners of war, and the protection of civilians. As is well known, the development of a set of measures aimed at humanizing armed conflicts was the international community's response to the tragic experience of the Second World War. A key contribution to the preparation of the Geneva Conventions was made by the Soviet experts, who knew firsthand about the atrocities committed by the German Nazis and Japanese militarists. The delegations of the USSR, the Belarus SSR, and the Ukrainian SSR worked side by side at the conference in Geneva, and the conventions and the additional protocols of the 1977 enshrined the most important rules of warfare. For example, the principle of distinguishing between civilians and combatants, as well as between civilian and military targets, the prohibition of indiscriminate attacks, the principle of proportionality in attacks, the prohibition of the use of weapons capable of causing excessive damage or unnecessary suffering. Unfortunately, as for the achieving the key goal of the UN Charter to save future generations from the scourge of war, unfortunately, it's still too early to talk about achieving that goal. Many modern armed conflicts are characterized by gross disregard for the principles and norms of the 1949 Geneva Conventions. And we don't have to look far, for example. Zelensky's gang, that we've already spoken a lot about today, have made violations of international humanitarian law. They're not just systems, but they're cult. I'd like to remind you that further evidence of the crimes committed by the Kiev regime was presented during a briefing by Ambassador-at-Large Murashnik on October 17th and published in his report for the third quarter of 2025. In the previous week alone, 20 civilians were killed, and another 85 were wounded as a result of shelling by Ukrainian Nazis.
Morning brings happiness at the gate, and a touch of preciousness. Evening glows with golden sparkles. Night shimmers with smiles and the golden touch of Ferrero Rocher. Crispy, creamy, crunchy, wrapped in gold. Show how much you care with the golden touch of Ferrero Rocher.
Continuing their work in this area, and the principle of inevitability of punishment will be fully upheld. But there are also good news. In October this year, with the support of the Russian Foreign Ministry, there were days of culture in many states. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, there were concerts of the monastery choir, there were soloists of the quartet of Berlinski within the 18th International Music Festival Autumn Sonnet. In Hungarian capital Budapest, the Days of Russian Spiritual Culture included the events in the largest monastery, the Basilica of St. Joan. A lot of people attended that event. There was also the performance of the soloist of the Russian choir ensemble by Lyudmila Zykina in the largest hall of Budapest. There was also a concert in the Academy of Ferenc Liszt, and these days took place in 5 cities, among which were Alexinansk, Nitsa, and Karlsk. There was also Festival Russia. Musicians took place in the celebratory ceremony of opening in honor of the volunteers who paid with their lives to liberate Serbia from the Ottoman control. During this event, the culmination was the concert at the central square, where there was the Sretenski Monastery choir. And important announce on October 22nd, 24th, with the support of Russian President Vladimir Putin, Moscow will host international events during which ombudsmen or human rights commissioners from more than 60 countries will exchange practices for protecting citizens' rights. In particular, yesterday, October 22nd, the 10th anniversary meeting of the Eurasian Alliance of Ombudsmen took place. Sri Lanka joined the alliance as a full member alongside the national human rights institutions of 10 countries: Armenia, Bahrain, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Russia, Serbia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Today, the 9th International Scientific and Practical Conference Human Rights Protection Issues Exchange of Best Practices of Ombudsmen will be held on the topic Human Rights Protection in the context of digitalization of society. The conference, held with the assistance of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will bring together leaders of national human rights organizations and representatives of international organizations. This annual event has established itself as a popular platform for discussions on human rights issues and for forming common positions on topical issues of human rights protection. Every year, the geography of participants expands. Over the past 8 years, ombudsmen and representatives of national human rights institutions from 75 countries, as well as heads and representatives of 19 international organizations, have taken part in the conference. This year, representatives from more than 40 countries are participating in person, despite the complex logistics associated with the sanctions policy of unfriendly Western countries and attempts to isolate us from the international community. They're so funny. About 20 countries are joining via video conference. For the first time, we will see participation from Algeria, Vietnam, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Djibouti, Madagascar, Mozambique, Myanmar, Lebanon, Chad, and Andorra. On October 24th, a meeting of ombudsmen will be held in the BRICS Plus outreach format. Memorandum of understanding are to be signed between the Human Rights Commissioner of the Russian Federation, Madam Moskolkova, and the heads of foreign human rights institutions in a number of countries such as Djibouti, Mozambique, the Dominican Republic, Myanmar, Peru, Sudan, and Turkey. The events will be attended by representatives of the Russian Federation states authorities, human rights commissioners in the constituent entities of the Russian Federation, representatives of civil society institutions, and the scientific community. And I would also like to use this opportunity and to say thank you to all of the institutions responsible for human rights in all the regions that we're working closely with. The issues of Russian citizens are numerous for all the citizens abroad. Unfortunately, from emergency situations to personal tragedies. And as for the institution responsible for human rights, as for the gathering of documents, assistance, for contacts with relatives, logistics, assistance, and a special thank you for those who, in line with human rights work, starting with Madam Moskolkova and, of course, going as far as participants of the Russia-wide movement of the true Russian society, try to engage with us in order to assist Russians. And here it's particularly about what happens abroad. On this track, we always feel the support and assistance and active desire to be involved in assisting our compatriots. There is an important date on October 25th, which is the liberation of northeastern Norway from Nazi invaders by the Red Army. The bloody battles fought in the most difficult conditions have become an example of the valor and fortitude of Soviet soldiers, whose feat is immortal. During the Petsamo-Kirkenes operation to liberate the Arctic, the Red Army lost 6,084 men. The shared history of Russia and Norway during World War II is linked not only to the events of 1944 in the north, but also with the fates of tens of thousands of Soviet prisoners of war held in Nazi concentration camps in Norway. The ordinary Norwegian citizens who helped them survive. I had a chance as part of the Russian delegation, which was headed by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, to witness the conditions in which the Soviet prisoners of war were held. It was a memorable event, and at the entrance of one of the Stollen, this kind of bag where Soviet prisoners of war under the threat of guns. And we weren't even inside, which is existing in the conditions of permanent frost. There was a specially equipped platform, which was also warmed up by special equipment. The ceremony lasted for an hour and a half. I'll be honest. As members of the delegation who assisted the minister, ran every 15 minutes to stay warm in the cars. It was bone-chilling cold. It was impossible to move your limbs. The minister was in the front row, and he heroically withstood the entire ceremony, as he always does. And the sole thought that still will not leave my mind: we are happy, are fed, and we could not withstand 15 minutes there, dressed in warm coats. Just imagine those prisoners of war who survived there without food. We're not even talking about medical supplies or clothes. In these conditions of terrible cold, it's a mystery. I remember perfectly, I will never forget our way home, back to Moscow. We were on the plane, it was comfortable, with blankets, with warm seats, with food, with tea and coffee. We were clothed because the cold would not leave. The whole way home. And the whole way home I was dressed in my winter coat, despite not only the temperature being above zero, it was plus 25, I still could not regain normal temperature. And I usually tolerate cold quite well, but it was impossible to tolerate that kind of cold. So the way the Norwegians today managed to forget it, the Norwegian officials decided to turn a blind eye to those history pages, is no less a mystery to me. They not only forgot our historic feat, but their resistance fighters. How they forgot about nearly 13,000 Soviet prisoners of war who died and remained forever in Norwegian soul. Why did they forget? Because today they support those who try to glorify the Nazi criminals. They support them politically, they support them with arms, and Norway is among the first. Perhaps they should visit these places more often where Soviet prisoners were held. Perhaps they should be there. Not for 10-15 minutes, but for 2 hours, so that this cold is felt, and then they will regain their memory. Especially, it is believed that when it's cold, your head can think more clearly, although I am not sure if this can apply to current Norwegian official attempts to deliberately distort this historical past shared by our two countries for the sake of political expediency, which have recently become increasingly common in Norwegian official discourse, and in certain practical steps taken by individual representatives of the authorities, are unacceptable and shameful. We cannot regard them as anything other than rewriting and falsifying history and erasing the memory of future generations. We thank all those in Russia and Norway who are involved in preserving historical truth and memory, restoring the names of those who died and lie in unmarked Soviet graves on Norwegian soil, and searching for their relatives. This work will continue, no matter what. Every year on October 25th, in order of the liberation of Eastern Finnmark, the Consulate General of Russia holds a solemn ceremony at the monument of the Soviet soldier in Kirkenes, and we welcome everyone who wants to join Russian diplomats in honoring the memory of the heroes. On October 28th to 31st, Mariupol State University, named after Quinji, will host the 3rd International Forum of Young Diplomats. The forum provides young people aged 18 to 35 with a unique opportunity to immerse themselves in the world of diplomacy, exchange experiences, and present their views on current international issues. In this anniversary year of the 18th anniversary of the Great Victory, one of the central themes of the forum will be preserving historical memory and countering the falsification of history. The program of events, as per tradition, will include the participation of representatives of the state authorities, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country, who will share their practical experience with the audience. Participants will also have a unique opportunity to hear expert assessments of current issues in international relations from leading representatives of the scientific community. There will be panel discussions with representatives of regional authorities, master classes on political psychology and public speaking, simulation of the Donbass Model UN project. We're confident that the upcoming forum will be productive and businesslike and will contribute to the development of new initiatives and projects. From the 28th to the 29th October, the Petrovsky Travel Palace in Moscow will host the most beautiful building that has been restored recently. Please visit it, even if you don't have an official invitation for the aforementioned event. Just come and visit it. It's truly one of the pearls of our city. So this palace will host the International Forum Women for the Preservation of Traditions, organized by the Council of the Eurasian Women's Forum and the National Center for Historical Memory under the President of the Russian Federation. The forum will be attended by representatives of state and local authorities, political, social movements, scientific, educational, and business communities, cultural figures, historians, and experts. Guests and participants of the forum will discuss the forming of an ecosystem of traditional values in the everyday and professional activities of women, as well as in the public sphere, as the basis for prosperity and the development of intergovernmental cooperation. They will exchange views on trends in entrepreneurship, education, and other areas, consider projects aimed at strengthening national identity, passing on cultural heritage to future generations, and promoting cultural traditions. Initiatives aimed at promoting and strengthening intercultural dialogue and cooperation between women from different countries, study practices for preserving the traditions, heritage, and the way of life of the people of the North, Siberia, and the Far East. The forum venue will host the award ceremony for the winners of the All-Russian competition, Women for the Preservation of Traditions. About 2,000 women represented different regions of Russia took part in the competition, as well as foreign participants from more than 35 countries around the world, including the US, Canada, Australia, Austria, Belgium, India, Canada, Indonesia, Iran, the United States, Turkey, Uzbekistan, France, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Ethiopia, and others as well. Information about the forum and the accreditation procedure will be posted in the text version of the briefing, and we invite representatives of Russian foreign media to participate in covering this event.
Еще одно событие.
And another topic, you know that we have a bilateral year of culture of Russia and China, that it will take place in 2024, in 2025, from 29th to 30th October. there will be a dance overture of BRICS countries that will take place in Beijing. This initiative is carried out at the initiative of the Russian Foreign and Culture Ministers. It's aimed at strengthening and fostering cultural ties between BRICS countries and partner countries, as well as at establishing an international choreographic community on the basis of the Alliance of Folk Dance Culture of BRICS. I recall that it was established in 2024 following the meeting of Ministers of Culture of BRICS countries as part of the 10th St. Petersburg International United Cultures Forum. At the Beijing Academy of Dance, there will be master classes on folk dancing, and there will be an international flashmob. Traditionally, there will be performance given by the National Show of Russia, performed by the Russian National Ballet Kostroma, and it will be also performed in various parts of China. You know that this event and performances were given in Egypt and UAE, and now it is China's turn. In 2026 and 2027, we're going to hold dancing overture over the world in Brazil, India, Ethiopia, and South Africa. It will help to unite people based on common cultural humanitarian values. It helps to implement educational projects in folk choreography, including studying choreography in both countries and promoting friendly cultures in friendly countries. We also will have a festival, Peoples of Russia and the CIS, that will take place from October 21st to November 5th. It will be organized in the World Trade Center. The plenary session will be started on October 31st. It will be attended by Secretary of the Security Council of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, Special Representative of the Russian President on International Cultural Cooperation, Mikhail Shvedkoy, Head of the Federal Agency for Ethnic Affairs of Russia, Igor Barinov, Head of Россотрудничества, Evgeny Primakov, and Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Belarus to Russia, Alexander Rogozhnik. The business program of the festival will be continued by the Sixth All of Russia Forum, Peoples of Russia, which will have sessions about traditional, spiritual, and moral values, relevant issues of information, counteraction to destruction, ideologies related to inter-ethnic relations, assistance in adaptation of foreign nationals, and protection of historical memory of the peoples of Russia and the CIS. Also, the business program will include the All-Russia meeting and strategic session on the implementation of the state national policy with the Russian authorities that are responsible for the implementation of the state national policy. On November 1st, attendees of the festival will be able to take part in the anniversary 10th All-Russia action, the Great Ethnographic Dictation. At the Defender of the Fatherland year and the year when the dictation is held for the first time, participants will be able to receive questions from the participants of the special military operation. On November 2nd, the business program of the festival will be continued in Moskino Cinema Park. It will have a lot of films, among which is not on the list, directed by Sergei Karatayev. It's a military drama based on the book written by Boris Vasiliev. It tells about the heroic defenders of the Brest Fortress, and for that film, a film set, Brest Fortress, was constructed in the Moskino Cinema Park with the Citadel and with the Church of St. Casimir. The festival will show the joint Russia, Uzbek and Russia-Tajik movies like Taste of Sun, which tells about accidental discovery of ancient treasuries of the Emir of Bukhar, and the Root of Anger, which is a detective shot in Tajikistan. November 3rd, there will be a cycle of events, media environment in Russia and the CIS, involving the leading representatives of the media community and blog environment. November 5th, National Center of Russia is part of the 13th meeting of the Secretary of Security Councils of member states of the CIS, and that will take stocks of the festival. We will provide the full information about the event in the text version of our briefing. And now it's time for questions, please. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. International Live, please. Yes. Recently, the EU top diplomat Kaja Kallas has made quite a strange statement about the summit of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Budapest, she stated that no, it's not nice to see that really a person with an arrest warrant put by the ICC is coming to a European country. What do you think about it? I know maybe 10 years ago, one could say that they were confused or have no understanding of what they're talking about. But now what they're talking about, it again reflects their double standards, their incompetency, illiteracy, and they are deliberately destroying the international law and legitimacy in general, because law is law for everyone. Yes, there are legal practices, there are lawyers, there are some aspects and details, but if there are decisions, official decisions, these decisions should be put into practice because they are part of law and part of legitimacy of the structure that we do not recognize, but yet they recognize and they want to implement their decisions. What I'm talking about, well, I will explain. Look, she stated, no, it's not nice to see that really a person with an arrest warrant put by the ICC is coming to a European country. Well, she says it's not nice, but she's saying that not at her national capacity. She's empowered.
ये वाला रील देखा? अरे ये वीडियो देख, ये वाला वायरल है। हाँ ये रील देख।
दो पहियों की सवारी चलती अपनी शान से, हीरोगिरी छोड़ के तू कृपया जरा ध्यान दे। रुतबा है ठंडा और सॉलिड है बंदा, जिगरे की आवाज सुन।
I'm feeling unforgiving. Fall out like I knew the place, the skin on you was spinning. Craving the adrenaline, walk like my dog, you're never ready.
दुनिया देखती है, तू दिखा।
Another leader visited Hungary, and this leader is again is of interest for the International Criminal Court, and European leaders like Macron and others were discussing how it's difficult for them to imagine his arrest, and they even remembered that officials have immunity. They did everything to justify their presence. What Kallas said about it? Now their position has changed completely. What was nice now, it's not nice at all. It's a perfect illustration of what we have been saying all this time. They are destroying the fundamentals of their lifestyle and their law and organization. They're just saying empty words about law and legitimacy. They do whatever they want, but they apply the law selectively when it fits for them, just to provide a cover for their actions. And that's, again, that's their attitude to justice and the justice system. They recognize the International Criminal Court, not Russia. Russia does not recognize it. Probably they should address this issue inside the European Union if Kaja Kallas is empowered to make such decisions, whether she is empowered to do so. That's why these arrest warrants that are issued by the ICC, that the ICC rubber stamps with regard to heads of states, these documents, these arrest warrants are legally void and null. What is Kaja Kallas even talking about? European countries should ask her on what basis she is making such statements. What laws, what regulations are behind her words? We should be guided by these principles. Even if they rubber stamp this arrest warrants, but states have nothing to do with the ICCs, and they have explained that they do not recognize the structure, then this means that its decisions are null and void for them. That was actually the position of Mongolia and Tajikistan, which received Vladimir Putin. And the number of countries who understand and accept this anti-legal essence of this pseudo-justice is growing. It's quite interesting how the situation is developing. Well, that's all that I would like to say, responding to your question. Thank you. Thank you. RIA Novosti, please. Yes, Ms. Zakharova. Christian Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. We have only one question for you. Could you please comment information that the French investment state bank under France has launched a targeted program to mobilize funds with a view to fund the industrial and military complex of France? Christina, I don't know how old you are, but we know that you have been working with us for 26 years. Yesterday we have tried to calculate how many years you've been working with us, because some of my colleagues said that you were actually brought here from the maternity house. Well, we congratulate you on this anniversary. We believe that you have a noble job, but sometimes we believe that your work is not appreciated, but we're trying to pay attention to the difficulties that you're facing in covering news, international news, because working 25 years in one of the central global news outlets, it's a hard, amazing, and laborious work. I don't know, should I congratulate you or we should congratulate ourselves? Well, probably we should congratulate each other. And I think that our congratulations are on the way and you will see them. What was your question again? I wanted you to ask the program of the French bank to mobilize funds of the French population. I would like here to quote those Ukrainian officials who talk about the voluntary seizure of funds. Again, it shows that France is putting its economy on military wires. We see that the country is shifting its economy into the military form. And it's not the desire of the French citizens to protect themselves. If there was a real threat for them, they are creating an imaginary threat, and that's why they are taking money from the people's pocket and say that they are volunteering to do that. They are saying that they want to adapt the road networks, the healthcare facilities, especially the decision of the Renault to do that, it tells for itself. Just can you imagine the vehicle producing company that had received a lot of profits and bonuses and had a lot of income working in Russia and pressurized by its own ideologies because they are trying to take their money away to militarize the country, pressurized by its ideologies, the companies suffered from their actions, and they are trying to affect the French people. This company suffered twice from the French authorities. First, when it was deprived of the opportunity to work and to develop, because you know that this opportunity that they lost was taken by other companies working on our market. And the second, when they're trying to involve this company in the militarization of economy, it doesn't show the desire of the French authorities to address the conflict in Ukraine. Well, what is going on in France? Let's look at it. We see that France is preparing for the long-term confrontation with Russia. They want to escalate the conflict in Ukraine. They want to have the seat at the negotiating table, but at the same time, they want to have seats they want to be involved in the militarization of economy. It would be difficult for France to get out of the economic crisis. We see that social spending is decreasing, and instead of addressing real problems, authorities are concerned by finding new funds for their schemes, military schemes for arms race. They are trying to spin up hysteria about the imaginary Russian threat, and they try to take money out of the pocket of their people who are already faced with numerous economic difficulties. While they probably could think about protecting their own museums, because, again, it's a real threat. Each country deals with such crimes when museums are robbed, and not only museums. It's a problem of international cooperation between law enforcement bodies when stolen items should be tracked down. It's cooperation between insurance companies. It's an issue of global logistics, of how these works of art are moved to various expositions all over the world. These are real problems, but what is happening today in France when they are injecting billions of euros into the terrorist regime of Ukraine, but at the same time they are attacking their own countries and depriving them of the opportunity to work in Russia and gain profit from working there. Third is the lack of understanding of their domestic inner problems. And fourth is the total militarization, which is paid by the French taxpayers, which is terrible. Thank you. Thank you.
In next 25 years, we will continue to work, right? Of course. Good luck, and we wish you all the best. Is Izvestia with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have 3 questions for you today. First one, the EU Council has adopted the proposal of the European Commission to prohibit purchases of gas in Russia from the 1st of January 2028. The EU Council also has adopted the prohibition of Russian gas transit through the joining of other countries. What do you think? How will this measure affect the economy of the Union and its residents? Classic story on implementing a philosophic concept that just to displease someone, I'll harm myself. The European Union has especially tried to inflict as much damage as they can to our energy complex without any regard for energy security as a whole. And currently, there is a work on the draft project on the stopping of import of Russian gas. And recently, the EU Council has adopted their position towards this document, which has to be agreed upon in the European Parliament. As of right now, there is no prohibition of transit of Russian gas through European Union to other countries. But at the same time, the document highlights the necessity of the monitoring regime as for transit so that Russian gas cannot enter the EU market around these limitations. It's just ridiculous. I always recall the timeless work of art, a girl with matches. Do you remember the girl was getting cold and she was burning matches? People are passing by who could keep her warm, who could provide warm clothes or matches. But next to the girl, there is someone standing over the girl and telling her, no matter what you do, you have no right to accept assistance, any kind of help. You have these last matches. God forbid you accept any helping hand of being warm from someone else. We're prohibiting you from that. That is the exact same story. That was a European story. This fairy tale. So it resembles a tragic comedy with stronger emphasis on tragedy, of course, but it's totally bleak what we're witnessing. For the prohibition of monitoring, that the gas that enters Europe through transit that could be in demand by the European states for development, for emergency situations, if we fully ignore the ordinary life so that it doesn't enter their territory. It's hard to understand it. We're talking about a continent, the part of European continent that on its own does not have enough carbohydrates, and they place limitations on themselves. So they have no chance whatsoever to use the resources. Now we recall their plans on digitalization, on implementing artificial intelligence technology as an important element of digitalization. Energy and energy sources necessary to do it. They will need a lot more of those. Just think about how many computers they will need, how much energy will need to be produced in order to cool down all of that equipment. And ask yourself a simple question. What is it? It's enslavement. But it's not shackles that have been put on them. But it's a concept decision taken in a zombie state to impose this on themselves. It brings back the practice of totalitarian cults. And there's also the requirement to provide information a month ahead for the planned transit so that it could be tracked down, so that no one could get their hands on the gas. At the same time, considering the general anti-Russian nature of Brussels, we can't rule out that around these limitations, the European Union could also put obstacles for the Russian gas transit to third countries. Although transit supplies of Russian LNG to third countries have already been prohibited on March 26, 2025. The second question, last week, Kirill Dmitriev reported that there is a perspective of building a tunnel between the US and Russia. Donald Trump called this idea interesting. Was this issue discussed between the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Russia and US? And do you plan on further discussing it in the next round of consultations? You see, this idea saw some kind of development, even at the end of 19th and early 20th century. That's when it was first brought up. And that's when it was brought up by the US. And back then, the United States of America truly stayed true to the ideas that were first enshrined by their founding fathers, the development of economy, of financial spheres, the markets trying to sell their own production, legal measures. That's when it was first mentioned. I believe this statement was based on the historic precedents of this idea, and later on they love to recall it as a symbol that could allow us to perfect relations with, back in the day, the USSR and the US. I would just like to say that usually projects like that, and especially a project of these kind, is impossible without a political will and without preemptive steps in order to establish cooperation within our country in sectors. I do believe that a path should be laid down to these consideration, not just voicing out, but concrete initiatives of such scale. But it's already commendable that peaceful infrastructure and civilian projects of this kind are being discussed. It's a great trend. The only thing is that we recall how the former White House administration called for a destruction. Yes, there was no tunnel, but there was still quite powerful civilian infrastructure project, Nord Stream, which was destroyed a couple months after the White House called for the destruction and said that it should be destroyed. So these aspects should be taken into account as well. Other than that, of course, we've always advocated for the development of mutually beneficial, peaceful infrastructure projects. And third question, Head of European Diplomacy Kaja Kallas, after the meeting of the foreign ministers of the EU in Luxembourg, stated that 25 member countries have expressed their desire to participate in special tribunal against Russia and Ukraine without naming them. And she decided to not mention who didn't want to participate. Isn't that a sign that the idea of a tribunal isn't even popular within the EU, and Brussels has to hide the real picture in order to paint a picture of unity? Don't you think that creation of this special courts on political order undermines the idea of international law as a whole? You see, let's start what we've already spoken about. Russia has stated our position on the project of this illegitimate structure, if it ever sees the light of day. Its results are baseless for us. Any results will be considered as hostile démarche with inevitable consequences. If we give a legal assessment, and I believe a lot of lawyers would like to give you a broad answer and comment, this is a mechanism of paid for jurisdiction, and it has nothing to do with finding the truth. Its goal is to eradicate inconvenient persons, and it's no surprise that not everyone supports it in the European Union, and those who support refuse to say it openly, because this is a punishing organ. It can turn anyway. By creating a dangerous precedent, these methods could be used later on, for example, against the states of Collective West or against the allies of the Collective West today. So what we're hearing in the words is a punishing mechanism. That's what they're creating. It's a destructive idea for its authors, for special tribunals. Of course, it undermines the international law, and we will continue to explain its toxic legitimate nature to everyone, and we expect understanding from all the sensible structures in our country. Will continue to defend the necessitation of preserving international law despite the destructive actions of Western politicians, including those from the European Union and these odious personas. Thank you so much, Madam Zakharova. Thank you. Is RT Balkan with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. If you allow, we have two questions today about the Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you assess the decision of Mr. Dodik to pass over the mandate of the president to Anatrish Babic, who has been the acting president of the Serbian Republic, after the court order in Sarajevo, who has prohibited Dodik from exerting political power since he questioned the actions of illegitimate international community of Christian Schmidt. I would like to recall what is being discussed. The court order of October 18th of the Serbian Republic on the disposition of presidential functions. This is the internal affair of Serbian Republic. We have taken attention of that, and once again this step is
Smart investors don't gamble, they analyze. With factor analysis on share.market, check all the facts before you act. Get the entire performance for every stock at one place. Download share.market today and check it out.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
to answer to the gesture of goodwill from the Serbian Republic to return to the internal dialogue in the interest of overcoming this crisis. The long-term normalization of the situation would be the immediate closure of the Operative High Representative, which acts as the main generation of turbulence in the country. It is unimaginable that at the very heart of Europe, in a sovereign state, the one in charge is a foreigner, is a foreign agent, and he wasn't elected. But it's not for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it's for foreign states. And he tried to covertly intervene in the internal political life of that country. He's nothing but an impostor who tried to usurpate the powers without any right to do it. And I'm talking about Christian Schmidt, who calls himself the High Representative. But in fact, he's conducting a violation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Russia is one of the guarantors of Dayton, calls for the immediate seizure of foreign protectorate of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and to pass over all the responsibility for the future of the country to its people, to restore constructive inter-Bosnian dialogue with participation of 3 state-forming people and ethnicities at the principles enshrined in the peaceful agreement. Thank you so much. And the second question: what is Moscow's reaction to the decision of the Parliament of the Serbian Republic to renounce the laws that were contested in the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina? How will this affect the fight to preserve Dayton agreements that are constantly under the strike from Sarajevo and its Western curators? Taking decision happened with the law and order of the Republic of Serbia, and we have no doubt that the people have taken measures in order to protect the interests, to defend the constitutional rights and mandate of the Republic. And it's important to understand that the authorities of Serbian Republic have to work in the conditions of acute crisis that we've already mentioned, crisis that has been artificially provoked by the Western states, with the leading role of London and Berlin, that in the true course of their neo-colonial policy, of their policy of dictature, try to preserve their foreign control on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Russia, as before, supports the fight of leadership of Serbia against the erosion of basic principles of the Dayton Agreement that oversees the decentralized architecture of the state with 3 state-forming peoples and 2 entities. If that is all, is the Chinese Media Corporation with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. We're here. We only have one question. Beijing is holding the 8th meeting to discuss the 5-year plan of development of China. What are your plans for the coming 5 years? How could you assess the cooperation between China and Russia in different areas? The 4th plenum of the Chinese Communist Party and the entire architecture are part of interstate life of China. And I believe that the plenum will be successful. And I believe that it will be successful, and I wish all the participants successful work. But of course, it's an internal affair of a sovereign state. Thank you, thank you. Is the Reuters with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We're with you. Our answer has been partially answered by you when commenting on the EU actions on using Russian assets to finance Ukraine. In particular, you've said that Russia will respond accordingly, that better answers its internal interests. What kind of response will it be? Could it involve nationalization and selling of European assets to Russia? Do you mean the 19th package that they have adopted? I mean the initiatives of using frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine. We have repeatedly commented. I believe that the most important here are the authorities who have taken subsequent decisions. I can only say one thing, that the response will be very firm and painful, because we have explained it for a long time. We did not take any kind of aggressive position. We have tried to operate from the priority of cooperation in all areas and conditions. Try to provide an opportunity, although it's different practice when these démarches are conducted, when companies are leaving, when there's seizure of the operators of these countries. They react differently. In 2020, we have highlighted our peaceful approach and readiness to cooperate. And we have done this truly understanding, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation said, that they will get tired. And then we will take subsequent measures. No one has made hasty decisions. No one tried to take it out on someone, trying to apply to companies or to a particular person any kind of measures that could be seen as tactics of burned soil as a response, to try to act out. No. Always there were responses, they were targeted, and they were trying to make it, not to make it worse for them, but to make it better for us, when they've truly tried to make it as bad for us as possible. But if, despite all our patience, despite our peaceful approach and our orientation to cooperate, they will take these measures to steal assets, the response will be painful. What kind of response will it be? That's the competence of the relevant authorities.
Thank you. Bulk News, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. I have a question about Budapest. Well, but since the summit is cancelled, but I would like to ask you another question. We have just received news from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia. They are working on the 20th sanctions package. Quite often I notice that it's the Baltic countries announce new sanctions against Russia. They are acting even more aggressive than EU countries, which is strange because taking into account our region and territories that are close to each other, it would be much more useful for them to develop relations with our country. What can you say about it? I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? Yes, today, Estonian Foreign Ministry announced that new sanctions against Russia and that they're developing new ones. And quite often such statements are made by Baltic states. Wait. We have told you already that once the 19th second package is published, we will be able to comment it because there is a bureaucracy, certain bureaucratic processes in the European Union. Once sanctions are published, we will be able to provide some information. There is no opportunity to provide any comment using just their statements and not documents. It's strange that they are making such statements because they want to achieve peace in Ukraine, but yet they are obstructing it. They are taking action to reach quite the opposite. That's why they are saying that so that they want to create such a thing, that they want to create an illusion and distract people, and to say that EU countries are doing their best to build peace and that they are trying to address the conflict. That's why they are requesting the seat at the negotiating table, or they organize some peace formulas or peace formats to distract attention. They are doing that to hide the truth, because you have already answered your question. They are doing that in order to escalate the situation. They have made a wrong bet. They have made a bet on Ukraine. They are doing that in order to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. What's the purpose for that? Because peoples of the European Union do not need it, but nobody asked their opinion. Once parties are trying to convey this message, these parties are marginalized, they are eliminated, they are deprived of the opportunity to state the obvious. But if people want to cast their vote at the elections and to vote for those who want to explain that the current approach of the European Union is not helping to address the issue, these political figures become persecuted by the EU officials. The truth is that, unfortunately, for centuries, Russia hasn't been portrayed as an equal and full-fledged partner. Russia has been viewed as a country as people who should be robbed and pillaged. It was formulated even at the state policy of a number of states of the Western and Central Europe. Today they are not openly writing about that, but I believe that this phrase inflicts a strategic defeat on Russia perfectly describes their intentions and desires. But to learn more about that, we need to go deep to their consciousness, so that those who call themselves leaders as the European Union, it should be assessed if they are connected to their people or they are more connected to liberal elites, globalist elites, some say American ultra-liberal elites. Well, we'll leave these discussions to political scientists. Okay, thank you. Lenta.ru. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. We have only one question for you. Recently, the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, stated that he is ready to sign a huge deal with the United States. What Russia thinks of the intensification of US-Belarus contacts and what role Belarus plays in the normalization of the Russia-US relations? I wouldn't like to repeat myself, but again, I wouldn't like to be reprimanded for not saying about it at the briefing. Belarus is our closest strategic ally. With Belarus, we strongly and closely coordinate approaches to international stage, including in line with the program that was adopted at the highest level of agreed actions in the foreign policy of member states of the Treaty on the Establishment of the Union State for years 2024-2026. Presidents and foreign ministers of our countries regularly exchange information on the development of cooperation with the new American administration. We support constructive and mutually respectful dialogue with all our foreign partners, and certainly not at the expense of national interests and our allied commitments. And since Donald Trump has taken power in the United States, Washington is pursuing a more balanced and rational foreign policy course. We take into account their statements and specific steps in this regard. The White House says that they will stick to this course with regard to Russia and its allies. Moscow and Washington has enough channels for direct dialogue. But at the same time, I can say that I have provided already my information about relations between Russia and Belarus, and if you have no questions, I would give the floor to another journalist. Thank you. Thank you. News.ru, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Armenia continues the series of arrests of opposition leaders. Samvel Karapetyan was arrested. The mayor of Gyumri was arrested. Opposition says that police officers took illegal actions and they are working at the order of Nikol Pashinyan, which is completely illegal. Does it present a threat to the democracy and development in the region? We closely follow the situation in Gyumri. It is the second largest city of Armenia. 102nd Russian air base is based there, as well as the Consulate General of Russia, branch office of Rossотрудничество. The city authorities actively develop ties with various regions of our country. We have a rich common history, which is well known by the war memorial, the Mountain of Honor, that is dedicated to Russian officers who fallen during the Russia-Turkey wars. In August, the Heads of State Council of the Commonwealth of Independent States Gyumri has received a title, the City of Labor Glory 1941-1945, as for the assessments for the arrest of the city mayor Vardan Gukasyan. It is a domestic affair of Armenia, but at the same time, I should say, we noted that leaders of Vanadzor, Berda, Goris, and other regional activities faced with criminal charges. Some people were arrested. We hope that it wouldn't tear justice system away from its people and wouldn't undermine credibility to the justice system of Armenia, which was stated by the Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan he told about the systemic issue of the justice system at the Forum of Armenian Democracy. I think it's even more relevant today because Armenia enters a new electoral cycle. Parliamentary elections are scheduled on June 2026, and that's why it's important. Moving on, Al-Mayadeen, please. Are you there? Yes. We're here, Ms. Zakharova. We're always here for you. We know that Russia has traditionally good relations both with Israel and Lebanon. Can Russia be a facilitator, an intermediary, and a guarantor in settling the Middle East peace process, especially at the border? The position of Russia on the Arab-Israeli conflict is about the need to ensure its comprehensive and just solution based on the international legal framework that includes the creation of independent state of Palestine with territorial integrity that lives together with Israel in peace and security. We promote these approaches consistently in bilateral contexts with our partners and at various international platforms, especially in the UN Security Council as its permanent member. You know that the USSR and then Russia as the successor state was never a side of this conflict. On the contrary, being the initiator of establishing and being a part of being an active actor in the Middle East Quartet, we have always tried to be objective and impartial intermediary in this process, and we called to the successful completion of these political processes that was established by the Madrid Conference in 1999. We are not to blame that the work of this sole international recognized instrument of addressing the Middle East conflict over the last years was frozen, and we have been calling to reanimate this project. We are ready to support any peacekeeping initiatives that are being put forward by Arab countries and that are acceptable by Israel. At the same time, we stick to the goal of normalizing situation in the conflict area that will help to achieve lasting peace for all peoples of the Middle East region. Can I ask the second question, please? Can we view the recent contacts and visits, high-level visits between Russia and Iran as a part of mediation efforts of Moscow between Iran and Israel? We know we have a vast agenda for Russia-Iran context because we're discussing settlement of conflict stations in Middle East, and at the same time, we note the determination of Tehran to find solutions, negotiated solutions to the issue of the Iranian nuclear program and their desire to de-escalate tensions. Our comments, public comments, and our work at the international organizations, in particular in the United Nations Security Council, our efforts that are taken at the bilateral format, we hope that Israel will take quite a reasonable approach to all of that. Russia welcomes and supports everything that is made to overcome a profound crisis of trust that exists between the two countries. We are doing our best to prevent new cycles of armed confrontation and to ensure the long-term stabilization in the region. Thank you. Viralk, please. I have only one question today. You know have been made significant changes to the migration legislation of Russia. There are problems at the borders. There were protests as a result of which one security border checkpoint was blocked. Are there any changes on the issue that will help drivers of truck drivers to work in Russia? Well, you mentioned that protests take place and they involve truck drivers and other persons. I believe that migration is not the only problem. But as for the issue of truck drivers, this work is being worked out by the Russian agencies, the Russian Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Transportation. If you have a question, a specific question, we can help you submit this question to these agencies. We have only a question when the situation will be resolved, because it will create a problem for everyone. We are committed to finding a solution. No one is going to tell you a specific date, but again, I can ask my colleagues and I will provide you a more detailed information about it. News front, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. We have one question for you, if you allow. Defense Minister of the Netherlands, Ruben Brekelmans, stated that his country supports Ukraine and he believes that Russia could be attacked with any weapon without restricting the range of weapons. What the Russian Foreign Ministry thinks about it? Does it incite crimes? Does it incite hatred? Why an official or foreign state believes that it is allowed to him to call to striking Russia? Well, let's start from the lyrical part. They have lost the touch with reality. They have lost it completely. They believe that their lip service will not make them responsible for that. The situation in Ukraine didn't teach them anything. They don't understand that they need to be responsible for their words and actions. They were never held accountable for that. I'm talking about the Netherlands, who is a member of NATO and various coalitions. They were never held accountable for war crimes that they committed over the past decades, that they do not feel as a responsible NATO member for the situation in Afghanistan. They didn't compensate citizens of Iraq for enormous suffering that they brought to their country. They do not feel responsible for situations in Syria and Libya. They do not feel any shame for conflicts that were fueled by NATO, that were fueled in Europe. In particular, NATO countries fueled the conflict in Ukraine. And as for Yugoslavia, it was a direct aggression of NATO. They were never held accountable for that. And this impunity makes them feel that everything is allowed for them, that they can tell whatever they want. And they are treating their citizens in the same way, and they believe that any statements based on anti-Russian rhetoric are logical. I thought that the situation in Ukraine should have taught them something, but they do not feel empathy at all. They have no compassion. The state of Ukraine, the state as a political entity, the state as the collection of territories of regions, they destroyed it and they do not feel responsible for what they did. it's the Hague is escalating armed confrontation. At the same time, it's raising its bets. First, they were the first who talk about the supplies of tanks for the Kiev regime, and they delivered these military supplies. Then Hague was the first who provided fighter jet F-16 for Kiev. Then they allowed to use these systems to strike military and civilian infrastructure inside Russia. By advocating for the war until the last Ukrainian, the Dutch authorities are mired in the Ukrainian conflicts, and they're accomplices in the war crimes of the Kiev regime. Today, few doubt that it's the European Union and its belligerent members like the Netherlands who pump Ukraine with weapons and who incite Ukraine to continue combats are the main obstacle to the settlement of the crisis. At the same time, we see how the situation affects the White House, how they're trying to influence the White House in order to prevent the negotiating process and peace process through political and diplomatic means.
And by threatening their citizens with the Russian threat, the Brekelmans and Dutch politics try to cover their own failures on all directions that are actually very sensed by ordinary Dutch people. And this is further proved by the official statistics of the National Bureau of Social and Cultural Planning of Netherlands. So I will respond to Brekelmans. I will respond to his retorts with figures. 59% of the Dutch believe that their country is going in the wrong direction and do not believe in the ability of the current authorities to effectively resolve the key issues in the socio-economic sphere. So Brekelmans and his colleagues should have more time and attention for their own issues instead of instigating anti-Russian hysteria. They should not resort to nationalism and Nazism, and they should not resort to racist practices that for a lot of Western officials have turned into a maniac idea. Thank you. Thank you. Is the voice of fatherland with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have 2 questions, if you allow. Of course. The U.S. has frozen a lot of Russian assets. Are there any negotiations on their return, and if they aren't unfrozen, could we ask for Alaska back as part of the debt? What about you? Could you ask that? No. I don't mean the basis. Just you personally. You're a public organization. Do you have the powers? Do you have enough willpower to do it? Or you think that you should delegate it? Will you do it as a public structure? I believe this issue could be raised. You've already raised the issues, but you're addressing it to a foreign policy institution. You as a structure, as a union, you have your civic position. How do you assess it? Are you ready to maybe take charge of this movement? At the moment, we haven't worked through it. Well, then let's go back to it once you for yourself have decided on this position. It's not because I don't want to comment the assets issue. I don't want to engage in populism. If you occupy these positions, that means they are not an empty sound to you. So perhaps you should be able to formulate your own civic position, and then we can discuss it. As for assets and the reaction on the robbery of assets, I've already devoted at least 3 briefings to it, so feel free to quote me on that. No matter where these assets are taken, where our buildings are taken, we always respond accordingly. And the U.S. under Obama, when he left in 2016, also took a lot of objects that fell under diplomatic immunity, and they received reciprocative measures. And I believe that you understand that any such measure receives a responding step. Whether it's a mirror measure, whatever is most beneficial to us. So don't worry about us, just try to think about your approach as a civil structure, and then we will go back to this issue. Thank you. And the last question. How does the Russian Foreign Ministry assess the effectivity of public diplomacy of Russia over the last 2 years? Do we manage to present our position to the world society despite limitations in Russian mass media? You see, assessing the work of the public diplomacy should fall on you and not on us. It should fall on the public, on the authority organs. We can only present information on what we're doing. As for our work, it's very widespread. We use a lot of instruments, and I speak about us as the agency. We present information in a timely manner. We shed light in mass media. We have already perfected digitalized diplomacy. We have taken leading position among other agencies, even according to the monitoring reports. We have been working on all tracks of this public diplomacy. There are large-scale events, conferences, symposiums, roundtables, of course, all this with digital support, not only aimed at the audience of those gathered there, but also for the widespread audience on presenting these ideas through internet. So we publish, we respond, we conduct crisscross events. We try to combine the historic issue with the modern technologies and opportunities, and I take pleasure in sharing concrete figures, facts. We're always open to constructive criticism because we consider it as proposals, as advice. If you have anything to present as your advice, we will take it into account. As for whether our voice is heard, I've just shared today how a citizen of Italy has published a book in his own language. And he's not alone. This book was published with the cover that on the first page, despite the fact that it's devoted to Ukraine, I was put on the cover, and the author described it that our information work was his source of inspiration to write the book around the events in Ukraine. So tomorrow we will present another book of an Italian author. Just recently I recorded an interview to 2 public officials who are bloggers with millions of subscribers. This is just daily routine. The interviews of Minister of Foreign Affairs gained millions of views. Statements of our representatives at the UN bodies are heard around the world. We publish articles. Our materials on social media accounts of the Russian Foreign Ministry are quoted for people all over the world. So once again, we continue to move forward. We continue to develop, to grow, using any opportunities we have. Thank you so much. Thank you. Is author E with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Ruslan Pankratov, author E. We only have one question today, and it's quite unusual. See for yourself. In the Cameroon segment of the TikTok network, there was a video where the Russian president is speaking in support of the opposition candidate in the presidential election of Cameroon. How could you comment on that? First of all, I would like to say that yes, indeed, in the Cameroonian segment of TikTok, They had a deepfake made video showcasing the president of Russia who apparently supports the opposition candidate. The elections took place on the 12th of October. This quite simple, yes, blatant fake, which was made using artificial intelligence and was thrown in the Cameroonian digital sphere before the official results were published. I just answered the questions of TASS agency recently talking about deepfake and talking about public officials. More often than not, fall victim to these deepfake technologies. And I've talked about another segment. And I would like to draw your attention why it's done. It's quite clear in order to combine modern technologies with good old lie in order to plant doubt in the Cameroonian society, to sometimes create contradiction with the state, with the people, perhaps to discredit or to try and discredit the friendly relations of Russia with African states. If that was the idea, and I believe that was the idea, we stand strongly against it, against using modern technologies, and we once again recall the necessity for the verification of the information published on social media. I believe it's a perfect chance to recall that we have a great verification mechanism for information. We publish, and a lot of us mass media have programs. Soon there will be a conference on the issues of fakes, of combating fakes. And I believe Russia was a pioneer in combating this evil. And was open to signing this kind of document on fact-checking, on responsible fact-checking. And other than that, we will make sure to add links to the text version of our briefing to the subsequent websites of our organization that present opportunities and instruments to identify fakes and help those who don't have these chances to understand immediately if it's fake or not, or at least to launch their own investigation. So the dialogue on fakes, it's not just a conference, it's profound work that's been conducted, and it hosts under its wings representatives of many countries, journalists, investigators, shares best practices, shares situations and experience on identifying fakes, technological new developments, and we're preparing to participate as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in this conference, in the dialogue about fakes, which will take place for the third time in our country. And the second time there will be a strong international component, and we will talk about it more detailed later on. That's very useful information and a great work. Thank you. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. I wish you all the best.
He made even the most controversial statements. He cancelled the summit Russia-US that was proposed by the US side. We understand that the comments will be provided by the press service of the Russian president about it. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation is open to maintaining contacts with the US State Department to follow up on the understandings that were reached at the telephone conversation between the presidents of US and Russia on October 16th, we needed to stick to the parameters on various aspects of the dialogue, and as well as to continue our progress in the dialogue with regard to the Ukrainian peace process. We hope that Washington will continue to share their approaches and motives for the actions that they are taking. We would like to reaffirm that, talking about the diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian conflict, Russia continues to adhere to the goals of the special military operation that were proclaimed in February 2022, neutral, non-bloc, non-nuclear status of Ukraine, denazification and demilitarization and development of secure guarantees for the freedom of the Russian-speaking population, as well as for providing unobstructed operations of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is the starting point in our work with various countries who want to make a positive contribution to the peace process. We need such a configuration of negotiated solutions that will address the root causes of the conflict and will ensure lasting peace in terms of constructing Eurasian and global system of indivisible security. We do not see any major obstacles to continue the process that was initiated by the Russian and US presidents to identify the frameworks for the Ukrainian peace process and to achieve these results. We understand that it's a hard and laborious work, and this work shouldn't be carried out at the microphone or through the leaks and information. It should be done by diplomats, by taking diplomatic efforts, by using diplomatic toolkit. I think everything is clear in this regard. Since we also had a lot of questions, we noted that the U.S. Department of the Treasury has introduced unilateral sanctions on the Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, and I quote, due to the fact that there is a lack of commitment of the Russian side to the peace process in Ukraine. We view this step as counterproductive from the point of view of messages that are in favor of addressing the conflict. If the current US administration will follow the example of their predecessors who tried to coerce Russia into renouncing their national interests by imposing unilateral sanctions, the result wouldn't change. They will fail, and they will strongly affect the stability of the global economy. But we won't face any problems taking into account the decisions that were taken by the Department of Treasury. Our country has adopted and developed solutions and continues to develop its energy potential. Again, talking about sanctions, we have just received news about a new package of sanctions imposed by the European Union. Yes, we received the news, but this decision wasn't yet published, and it wasn't presented as a document. We have just acquired this information 15 or 20 minutes ago. We will provide a detailed commentary, and we will explain what would be the consequences of these decisions, and we will do that once we understand what kind of restrictions are envisaged by a new package of sanctions. We don't, again, have details of their sanctions, but again, we would like to repeat that unilateral restrictions of the European Union are ineffective. EU elites cannot admit the obvious. Sanctions that they impose on Russia as they conceived them. These sanctions do not work. Sanctions that they impose on Russia strike the European Union itself. Well, they have exhausted all their measures. They have tested all their methods and means that they have to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia and to strike the Russian economy and defense. Russia has a right to respond to the hostile activities of the EU, even if we are talking about the failed attempts to cause our country damage. We believe that it is more correct and more beneficial for us. We will respond properly and by taking into account our own national interests. Well, now, situation in Ukraine. The Kiev regime continues to attack civil facilities by terrorizing the Russian civilians. From July to September, 1,749 Russian citizens suffered from the actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, with 1,532 persons wounded, including 88 children. 217 people are killed, including children. The office of president likes so much to talk about children. I'm not asking if they have any shame. I will respond, they have no shame at all, but they should have some logic in their statements. If they hold children dear to them, probably the office of the president should stop killing these children. Again, 217 people are killed, including 6 children. From February 2022, 24,300 people, civilians, peaceful civilians, suffered at the hands of Ukraine Nazis in total. Just look. Zelensky and his gang like to talk about the Ukrainian identity and pride, but are they not asking themselves that since they care so much about the national identity, what nationality we are talking about? We are talking about people who have Ukrainian roots or what? Or they have different understanding of the Ukrainian identity in the office of the president. Or they think that only those who pledged allegiance to the Zelensky regime can live and survive. I even cannot tell these figures of victims, of casualties, because every time when I provide this rounded up statistic information, there are lives of peoples. Out of 24,300 people, at least 17,205 persons were wounded, including, and now pay attention please, 1,041 children under the age of 18. 7,094 persons were killed, including 234 children. In the past week, 105 Russian citizens have been affected by Ukrainian
you.